Thank you everyone for coming here tonight. Once again, thanks for choosing to spend your Tuesday evening with Immigrant Techies Alberta. We are a meetup group, a community that supports immigrant professionals to thrive in tech careers. So we exist as an invitation to newcomers into Alberta tech. Right. So the idea is to get people together, exploring what the options are for the future of work, make sure that the mentality we have when we think about job security is up to date, because we know that with the pace of change in the digital economy, in the future of work, it won't matter anymore that I have this degree, I've done this, I'm in this very secure role. There's actually no role that is secure. The only thing that can be secure is the mindset with which we approach our work, which means how adaptable are we? How ready to learn are we? When our tools change, are we able to pivot quickly when the prevalent tools change in the market? So that's the kind of things we do in this community to challenge people about how they think about their careers, and to also see themselves as potential startup founders, because who says newcomers, who says you need to come here to look for a job? What if you are here to provide solutions and be the ones to employ other people? So we wanted people to have that safe space where they can explore, because the tech space can somewhat be intimidating if you're not used to it. So we just created this space for psychological safety and for immigrants to explore technology. And we are like a bridge to the larger ecosystem. So once people are here, then depending on what they are looking for, what they are trying to get out of their careers, then we can channel them into that. So, and recently we started a series we call Tech Verticals series. And the purpose of that was to highlight each like specific industries, because people still tend to think about tech as a sector in itself, like the tech industry, which it kind of is, but it kind of is not. Because what is happening right now, what is happening today is that technology is transforming every industry. It's changing how everything is being done. Any sector you can think about, how we learn, how we entertain, how we teach, like how we bank. Technology is just disrupting everything. So it's important to focus on each of these industries and see what kind of transformations are happening there, and what does that mean? What does that translate to in terms of careers, future of work, what opportunities, what job functions that didn't exist before are being created because of all the transformation that is happening? And how can we continue to signal hunt for the new things that are happening so that we can be better prepared for them? So those are the kind of questions we attempt to answer in this series. Now we've had a focus on food tech and another on educational technology. So this week, we're talking about PropTech, what's happening in the real estate market, how is technology transforming that market? And our guest tonight is Al-Karim Khimji. He's the co-founder of Propra, which is a real estate startup. And I'll just let Al-Karim introduce himself and tell us about the amazing stuff they do at Propra. So Craig couldn't be here. They were supposed to be here together. I'm sure Al-Karim will tell us a little bit more about that. Yeah. Welcome to the virtual floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Winnie, and really excited to sort of share the Propra story with this group, but also share a perspective on PropTech and some of the things that we've learned and seen in PropTech. What I thought I could do is I've got about a 15-minute sort of like presentation on PropTech. And so I thought I could kind of walk through a couple slides, some nice visuals. I'll tell you a bit about the Propra story, and then would love to have a discussion and answer any questions that people may have. How does that sound?
Yeah, sounds great.
And I'll work in my bio and my co-founder's bio as well. But I'll also do that as like a bit of a pitch so people can see sort of how we do a portion of our investor pitch, if that's interesting.
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I'm about to share screen. This one, should be able to see that soon. I'll go on to slideshow. And just thumbs up. Amazing, thank you so much. Well, so I'll tell you a bit about Propra. Our thesis is that we automate residential property management. But before I get into that, I love to tell the story about PropTech. And I think PropTech's very interesting because, well, there's just so many things happening in PropTech. And when you look at the real estate space, it's a very large sector. And these are mostly Canadian. These are all Canadian numbers, but it gives you a sense of how many renters are in the country, how many realtors there are for a population of 30 odd, 40 odd million people. But the scale of the value of that real estate is almost close to $10 trillion in Canada. I'm sorry, $6 trillion in Canada. I'm used to telling a US and Canadian story, and so I keep on mixing up the numbers. But $6 trillion in Canada is a lot of money. That's a lot of wealth, and that's a lot of value. And so when we think about that, the advent of PropTech has been quite interesting. And I love this sort of quote from Forbes, where PropTech is really referring to technology that is disrupting and improving the space. And so PropTech takes various forms. I'm sure a lot of you have kind of seen different versions of PropTech. And so what I thought I could do is give a brief intro into some of the places that we've seen PropTech, and sort of formulate in that and sort of structure all those loose ideas of all the many things out there. But I think the bigger ones that we're really familiar with, and I always like to engage the audience, but it depends on how much the audience wants to participate. But would be curious if people are familiar with PropTech or have used PropTech maybe in the day-to-day lives. I know my neighbors just got a Ring doorbell, and so they really love using PropTech in that manner. I mean, if you want to throw it in the chat, you're welcome to. And I'll keep it open to if you guys want to, if people want to ask questions there too.
I have used Rent Faster.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, so that's a version of PropTech, right? It's I mean, Rent Faster is actually a Calgary-based story. Mm-hmm. They started in Calgary in the early 2003, 4, and have grown to they have a national network now. They're actually part of a national network of internet listing services, which is pretty amazing. They've actually, and I think they've also traded at least once, which means someone sort of acquired them at a certain point in time.
Yeah, I've used technology for example, when you have a property and you want to share the access to that property remotely. So
yeah, is that August?
Like no, Paxton.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, there's so many of those, and thank you for sharing that, because I think that remote access makes it really easy for someone to just use a phone and just kind of unlock their lock. Well, just to go back a step, though, PropTech's original form took two, right? One is Winnie, to your point, is internet listings, right? Is searching for a home, searching for a rental. The other one, which is actually a very interesting story, was about 30, 40 years ago, a realtor had this idea to say, hey, it's so hard to get a key when you're trying to show a place. What's an easier way to do it? And so they actually came up with these little lock boxes. And over time, those lock boxes had a Bluetooth functionality. And now they have like a key pin pad, which you get texted to your phone, and then you go and type in. And this was sort of the advent of the beginning of residential PropTech. And what's interesting about this is that the National Association of Realtors and Property Managers in the US launched a venture fund many years ago called Second Century Ventures. And the idea of that was, what will the next century of real estate tech look like? And that's how these key lock boxes, which many people, if you've looked at buying a home, oh my God, Mikhail, amazing. I think you and I were connected actually through a mutual friend, so I'm excited that you're here as well. Mikhail, feel free to jump in, because you are also an expert in PropTech. Mikhail just mentioned that he works for JLL Technologies. JLL is a global real estate brokerage with a PropTech arm. Mikhail, do you want to share a perspective as well?
Yeah, you're right. So I work with JLL Technologies, and so we kind of do a different kind of PropTech. So you handle, you know, rental and all of that. We focus on commercial real estate. So technologies like, I want to go to the office tomorrow. I want to book a desk. I want to book a room.
Yeah.
I want some, tickets and things like that. So yeah, that's what we do with JLL Technologies.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Mikhail, great to meet you. I know you and I owe you a coffee at some point. So yeah, so this is very interesting. And please jump in, like everyone, participate as much as you want. When I think about disruption in this space, I think about it in three specific ways. The first one is sort of automation and blockchain. The second is sort of the virtual reality, iBuying, iRenting experience. And the third is the smart home technologies. And these aren't in any specific order. It's more just like the way it kind of ended up in the presentation. But the first one is the automation piece, right? So we're seeing this more and more in terms of how do you, for example, because a lot of people are using, Uber or Skip, they're very familiar with that experience, right? Where information is being pushed to us, right? So, or think about when you're flying, Air Canada, WestJet, United, different airlines are sending you a text message and they say, you're boarding in 10 minutes, come to gate C50 to fly to Vancouver or whatever, right? And so that's interesting. And so how do we bring that same sort of technology discussion and sort of interaction into that relationship, be it the resident and landlord, that could be in the office context, it could be a residential context, it could be an industrial context, right? But it also could be in I heard of a construction company that has a virtual sign-in sheet. So when team members are coming on and off a site, they're all just logging in, and it's actually using geofencing to do so, which is pretty interesting, right? They know someone with their cell phone is in the space. That way they can track them. So anything happens from a safety perspective, they know how to go and they know who's physically on the site, and they can make sure they're okay, right? Because after, in a safety situation, go to a muster point and you want to make sure everyone's there. So that's pretty interesting, right? To be able to use that kind of technology. It's automated so that as soon as you walk on the site, boom, we have a list, right? But around blockchain, right? There's a lot of data, a lot of transactions. How do we ensure, data privacy, security? I mean, this is where it gets, as we go on, it gets actually more and more interesting and exciting. But we're seeing a lot of iBuying. I read an article that in Phoenix, 6% of all home sales last year were done online, where someone either virtually went to see the unit or not, but they just went online, flipped through some pictures, did a virtual viewing, and bought a home. That's huge. 6%, that's a huge shift in what was imagined to be possible. But we're also seeing the virtual reality in viewings. I heard of a tech company there's a conference in the US called Apartmentalize, which is like a tech conference of real estate, multifamily, and tech companies. And what they're doing is they're setting up physical hardware as when you develop a new building. And the idea is that when someone's coming in, moving into the unit, they can, let's say, I want to go visit a unit. I'm only available between 7 and 9 p.m. Well, I would get a code, be able to tap my phone, unlock the door, go on a virtual tour where someone's explaining it to me, but there's no one physically with me, right? And that ability is reducing the load on the leasing agent or the realtor, because what happens often, if you're a realtor, someone shows up at 1 p.m., the next appointment's at like 4 p.m., and the next appointment's at 7 p.m. What are you supposed to do in the middle, right? So if we can use technology to simplify these things, it could make these jobs easier. Obviously with renting, space as a service, very familiar with this. Obviously Airbnb and WeWork, very common sort of PropTech models of growth and scale. And obviously these are mega corps. The other one that we're seeing a lot of is keyless entry and security in home devices. So hardware in that experience. I was talking to a real estate developer yesterday, and he told me that they are building a new building in Toronto, and it has on the kitchen counter a place for you to put your phone so it'll charge. So they've already built in the charging station into your granite countertop for you to charge your device, right? So I think there's so many the advent of technology sort of permeating different aspects of our lives. I'd be curious to hear, are there any other sort of cool, using eyewear like Ray-Bans for virtual tour? Emmanuel, tell me more about that. I'm curious about that, your comment. So Emmanuel wrote, using eyewear like Ray-Ban for virtual tours. Have you seen that, or is?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
recently I know someone that's working on the technology. So he's trying to use like eyewear. So let's say if you're touring the place, then I can view it on my phone while you just put on the eyeglass. Then once you walk into the building, I can see everything you can see.
Wow.
So, and also it can also be used in other areas as well, like shopping, visual shopping and stuff like that.
So you can have someone go view the potential house on your behalf.
So, yeah, they just need to put on the eyeglass. You can just view it on your phone.
They could also then take a video, right? And then it's like a point of view. That'd be interesting for things like, I mean, there's so many applications, like training on industrial sites, art sales. I don't know, those are the two things that came to mind. But that's a very cool idea. Okay, that's a very cool technology. Interesting, Mikhail. So Mikhail's message was, I also worked for Sarah4. They are into keyless access control. Yeah, I think that's a big one. Keyless access control is, how do you provide that sort of mechanism where you're not physically letting someone in, letting someone out, but you know when they came in and came out, maybe they tapped their phone or tapped their phone, and then when they open the door, we know someone left, right? What was the application? Was it in a commercial office context, Mikhail?
Yeah, so with Sarah4, it was mostly utility companies. So you can imagine, for example, say TELUS, for example, they've got different locations where technicians go to fix things and all of that. So rather than a technician going to the head office to go pick up a key, he or she can just use his mobile phone to be able to open the padlocks. And then what will happen is the manager at the office, gets a notification allowing him to know that someone has opened the, a padlock or something like that. He knows the time, the location, and who it was that opened it.
Oh, amazing. That's very cool. That's very cool. I'm kind of curious, what are some other examples that people have seen where they're seeing, more PropTech sort of permeate their lives, or even interesting ideas?
Automatic license plate recognition, but with the vehicle that was pre-registered, so that we have access to a specific garage door. And specific entrances on buildings.
Interesting. You've seen that before, or that's an idea?
Well, I've seen it in practice in the US, but over here as one of my projects for school, I actually did a machine learning project just to read around license plates in order to give access in a way.
That's amazing. That's the other thing is that, and Mikhail, you may have a perspective with your professional experience, but more broadly, is I think that different markets have a different sort of desire to use different technologies. So I think the UK market is actually very different than the US versus Canadian versus Australian. And the reason I talk about those four is because obviously English, a lot of similarities, and you see PropTech companies sort of spread across those four. But it's very interesting to see sort of some countries are really open to these things and others are just like, no way.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add, I'm sure maybe Wumi might be able to, relate to this. So I'm originally from Nigeria. And so right now there's a PropTech company I came across where they can basically help you handle all your house chores. So you can imagine if you need someone to help you, fix something in the house, clean the house, wash your clothes, laundries and all of that. You have access to all of that from your mobile phone, really. It's an app, and then you can request for different kind of services. So yeah, the different ways of using PropTech in different regions of the world, really.
Amazing. And any other examples people want to share?
I like what Board is doing.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, Calgary-based Board, because I like that they are cutting off the middleman. the real estate.
Keeping it simple.
Yeah, because then you are able to really know how much you want to sell your property for.
Yeah.
Because many times the cost that you pay the agent sparks the house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you can just negotiate with your potential buyer or seller and cut off the middleman. So that's great too.
Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of strategy. There's another company that's so Bode is Calgary based. There's another company called Honest Door.
Yeah,
that's in Edmonton. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and Honest Door is doing some cool stuff around bringing transparency to pricing, and like how much was sold, how much was not sold, when was it sold, how much do you think you can rent it for, and sort of like democratizing access to price, or if you were looking to buy, because that's always a hard process, right?
Yeah.
So people should check that out. I mean, very cool stuff. So that's Dan, and then Robert at Bode and Alan are doing some cool stuff there at Bode, and they're Calgary companies. And another Calgary PropTech company called Only, OWNLY, and Jason is working on the idea of being able to like build your home from like a shopping cart, right? So if you want to like change the tile, how much does the price change from like hardwood to tile? Or if you want to put a different kind of backsplash in your kitchen or in your bathroom, how much more or less will it cost based on the current design of the building?
For new builds?
Yeah, for new builds. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Right.
And I think what's interesting is that Calgary also has this more and more prop tech coming out of Calgary. I just learned of another one today called Door Insight, and they participated in the I think one of the platform's incubator programs. So there's more and more. Any other people want to share some cool prop tech that you've learned about or seen before? I can go on about this forever. So let me share a bit about Propra. So I'll say a bit about my company. So Propra, we automate residential property management. Our goal is to think about what is the software you need to run a portfolio of rental apartments. And so that could look like a building in this image, but it could also look like a tower or just a series of rental apartments across the city. And what we figured out is that as you scale, obviously it's pretty obvious, figured out that as you scale, you need technology to help you manage that, because with scale becomes complexity. And so how do we use technology to challenge these processes? Because you could argue, you could say, Al-Karim, look, property management is an old business. People have done it forever. But we believe that we could use technology to challenge the way it's been done and do it differently. So I'm going to tell you a bit of that story. A bit about me. Grew up in a family business focused on hospitality, scaled that portfolio, including developing a hotel, seeing it from a pile of dirt, all the way through to a cash flowing asset. That showed me the world. So I ended up working for a private equity fund after my MBA, worked for McKinsey for a while. While I was at McKinsey, I actually started building my own rental portfolio. And that was interesting because I started to see these problems. And when you compare it against hospitality is a bit different. You have, shampoo bottles and cinnamon buns and like curved shower rods and points. But with residential property management, it's hard because everyone's sort of making it up. And I still, to this day, on a weekly basis, get a call about someone wanting to borrow a lease document or wants to see a sample inspection document. And so it tells me that there's something here. But I didn't do anything about that until I met my co-founder, Craig. And Craig's background is technology through and through. From launching a startup while he was in university to being the head of technology, effectively like the CTO at Skip the Dishes, where he scaled the technical team from 30 developers to over 300 and really built out this three-sided marketplace that we know Skip the Dishes to be. And so with his background for building technology to scale, my background in real estate and business, and a couple really strong team members and advisors, we've been able to bring this together. So a couple things that we saw as we approach this problem. One is that there's a lot of consolidation in this space. So people are buying buildings all the time. Bigger players are slowly getting bigger. People expect modern technology in their lives. And so when you think about it, if you can see your pizza in the process, you can see it drive down the street. Well, what does that mean for you as a tenant, as a resident, right? How do you know if someone's in your unit, right? Maybe there's a picture, maybe there's a calendar invite. How do we see some of these things? And I think that's permeating not only from the team members in your office, but also the tenants. So how do we bring that forward and change that relationship? So when we dug into this, we saw a couple interesting data points, right? People are unhappy with set maintenance. I mean, we learned of a bylaw in Toronto called Rent Safe TO. And I always thought it was about resolving a problem, but actually a landlord must acknowledge a problem within 7 days, which means there are people before the law who were not acknowledging problems in units, let alone fixing them. So we knew there was a tension point there. We knew that there was late payments. We knew that there was turnover. But when we really dug into it, and this was sort of the secret, was understanding the problem. We spent a lot of time doing interviews and research to understand where the opportunity was. We learned there's a lot of manual processes, including, I've been to a property management shop where they had a wall of Post-its, and that was when people's leases were expiring. And I was worried, like, what happened if there was like a fan on or something, and they lost all these Post-it notes, right? But that's a very common thing. Or point solutions, which means that people are using multiple software. They're using Excel and maybe a Dropbox with camera, so they're capturing images of an inspection, and then they're using an accounting tool. And there's no single source of truth. They don't know which is the most recent set of data. Who is that tenant in that unit, right? What's their email address? And the last aspect that I mentioned, which is the modern technology, right? How do we see that change our relationship? And so Propra's thesis is property management from a single tab. How do we bring it all together, all in one? And how do we use modern technology to not only go beyond automation, but almost to autopilot? And how do we keep it really easy? We know there's a huge market out there. There are 62 million homes, rentals, plus condos in Canada and the US. And it's a very large opportunity. When we do some deeper research, what we've realized and figured out is that for our product, for our target segment, it's about 80% of that market would be interesting. So the TAM, the total addressable market, would be the 62 million. Our serviceable addressable market and obtainable will be around the 80% mark, which is pretty exciting. There's millions of people. And when you look at the math and you look at the research, about 125 million Canadians and Americans together live in rental accommodations. So it's not a small group of people, and it's your home, right? And that's a bit different, is there's a lot of complexity for it to be your home and the implications of that. And by the way, interrupt me at any point. Happy to sort of chat about any of these aspects. And so when we think about our competitive advantage, it's really about our proprietary interplay of technology, the fact that we have the all-in-one solution, so folks aren't worrying about integrations or complex onboardings or using expensive consultants. And we've got a really great team that's using our experience and our network to help us scale really quickly. This is one of my favorite slides because this talks about how we're using technology to change that relationship. And so our customers are already seeing over $50,000 in value based on some of the processes we've been able to change. So take something, for example, like an inspection. Typically, I'm thinking about this husband-wife couple. They have 400 apartments that they're property managers for. Each inspection for moving in and then moving out would take 90 minutes each. Now we've reduced that process down to 30 minutes. And that's interesting because if you had a 400 unit portfolio with 33% turnover divided by 12 months, that means you've got 11 units that you're renting every month. And if you got 11 units moving in and 11 moving out, right? That's 22 hours, right? Of time that you're saving, because 11 times 2 times 1 hour. And that's interesting because that's between the end of the month and the beginning of the month, like the 28th to the 2nd. If you could give 22 hours back, what else could you do? Maybe you could rent another unit. Maybe you could follow up on something, right? Maybe you could do your, bank account reconciliation, which I know is not fun, but how do we help you do other things and use technology to make it easier? And so we're winning, just on the inspection point is one of the reasons why we're winning customers. This is my second favorite slide, which I like to share this message is we have won customers from 5 of our competitors multiple times, which means we're not just seeing people switch from things like Excel and paper systems, which we see a lot of, but half of our customers were actually using other software and are now using our software. And so these are some of the quotes. And we find this is really powerful because it helps give you a sense of sort of what people were thinking as they've come onto Propra's platform. And this is sort of the second last slide, which is our efforts are being recognized. We are growing at a ridiculous pace. We launched our product in May of 2022, so almost a year ago. We're growing at 32% month over month, which is the scale of doors. And so we are now in 6 provinces, and we're looking to continue to grow. I'm going to pause here because then I want to talk a bit about sort of like careers and hiring and teams and what are some of the things that we think about. But any questions about Propra or any thoughts or ideas?
I think you have an amazing platform.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. I mean, tell your friends and family. No, I'm joking.
Absolutely. Why not?
So I'm just wondering, are there synergies that you're drawing on between Propra and other PropTech companies, or even other tech companies that might not be particularly PropTech?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. When I think about the life cycle of the landlord, we're thinking about what do we build versus what do we borrow, or what do we partner, right? So I'll give you an example. We met a company, Edmonton-based, that does parking lot optimization. So let's say you are in a downtown core, you have an apartment building, and you leave at 8 a.m. Let's say you leave at 8 a.m. and you're not back till 6 p.m. Could someone park in your parking spot and pay you for it? Interesting, right? Because you're not there during, Monday to Friday, right? I mean, that's a very complex use case, but like that's not something that we're building, right? Like it's very specialized. And could we use that technology? Or we're thinking about insurance. Because if we have great data around maintenance, around preventative maintenance, right? How quickly you respond to issues, could we work with an insurance tech company to help provide better rates because of the risk adjudication is easier, right? And so could we work with another tech company to do that? But my favorite example of insurance is this, is let's say you own a building or you're managing a building, there's 100 units. Well, when someone moves in, they're required to show you tenant's insurance. But after they give you that piece of paper, how do you know that they're still paying? Maybe they call right after and they cancel that insurance. But what happens is, let's say something happens in your building, the landlord or the property manager is responsible to make sure that insurance is in place. And their policy is at risk, which is crazy, right? And so now there are platforms that allow people to, if you cancel the policy, the landlord will get a notification, almost like a dashboard, and say, hey, guess what? Al-Karim in unit 1201 didn't pay for canceled his insurance. And then you can follow up, right? And so how do we bring transparency and reduce the risk? And so I think that's a big one. We're also starting with chat with different fintech companies to think about how do we work with them in terms of payments or other ways that we can sort of collaborate to create that all-in-one life cycle experience. It's a great question. I mean, this is the toughest thing because you want to just do everything and you realize you can't. You can't be the expert at everything, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a big one. That's a big one for us. I saw someone else come off mute a second ago. There's someone else who wanted to share.
Yeah, I have a question. So you made mention of fintech or insurance companies. So like for me currently renting, right? And not pay, like, let's say paying rent every month and it doesn't reflect on my credit card.
Yes.
But if I want to get a rental property, they will request for my credit history. Is there anything you're doing in that respective, so there's a little bit of fairness because you pay rent 12 months in a year and but then it doesn't reflect anywhere that you're actually making any payments or making progress in that area.
So Emmanuel, I love what you just raised, because I think that last year, there were 1 million people that immigrated to Canada and they have no Canadian credit. And when they live in a rental, how do they get Canadian credit, right? And that's what you're saying to me, is how do we report the fact that you have this great history? So we've got 2 things planned and we're working on this right now. One is that when you leave a Propra building, like, so let's say your landlord's using Propra, you'll be able to get a rental report that shows that you paid your rent on time, and you can use that with your next landlord. But let's go one step further, is we've been in touch with a couple folks about how do we report that rent so it can lend to your credit score. They can show that every month, on the first of the month, on time, you made a payment, because that's how you build credit. And so I think you're spot on. That's a great idea, because you're right. If it goes through a credit card, that's good. But if it could be part of your credit report to say you also not only paid your credit card on time, but you also paid your rent on time, how much more valuable would that look? Because, over time, people want to get a mortgage. And if you want to get a mortgage, if that's something you want to do, you need good credit history, right? And so if you can get credit for the fact that you're paying rent on time, that'd be amazing. And so we're working on that, and we're going to make that a feature to say, how do we make sure that that report gets produced soon? So I think it's something we've planned for later this year.
And then there's a startup working on that too. City lending centers.
Okay. And there's another one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. So I know. The CEO is Margaret Adekunle. I know she's working on making sure that rent shows us credit history.
Amazing.
Especially for newcomers. So, but I don't understand the business model perfectly, but I know it's one of the problems they're trying to solve, because that's super important, like you pointed out.
Yeah, and I think the business model is typically, as the tenant, would you be willing to pay an extra couple bucks a month so it gets reported, right? Or maybe it's like an annual fee or something. So that's sort of the model that we've learned. There's another company we're doing this called Front Lobby. And so we're looking at, do we either partner with someone or just build it ourselves? And so this is the debate. I mean, it's a future debate because we're focused on a specific solution right now. But yeah, I love the fact that this is an important issue. And I think with Canada and in the US, there's a huge sort of immigration into these countries. And so what does that look like? And how do we support those populations so that they can settle well into Canada specifically?
Do you know if Front Lobby is Calgary based too?
Front Lobby, I think, is Vancouver. I think they're Vancouver based.
Okay.
We are actually just doing the work right now to kind of investigate what that looks like, because that will help inform our product perspective. Do we either look for an integration, or do we just build it ourselves? Sometimes that sort of thing is easier. There was another company that was Calgary based called Chroma that was looking at doing something like this too. But they kind of went on a different path. Excellent. Well, what I wanted to also do is, I know a couple folks here are interested in careers in tech, and I thought we could just share a couple things around sort of what we think about at Propra in terms of core values, and then the next slide is some of the roles, and I can kind of talk to you guys about what those roles look like, just to kind of give a flavor of the kind of roles that tech companies are hiring for, which may be basic, but if you want to skip that part, we can. I'll kind of rattle through it depending on where people are in their tech journey. So I think for Propra, we have sort of 3 core values. And the reason I like this slide is because, when I think about the core values, what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that transitioning from an oil and gas job or from any industry into tech is actually super easy. Because if you have the drive and you're interested in the problem or interested in the work, you are accountable. Like we say that we want to leave things better than we found it. And that we operate on trust, right? That we operate in a trust-based perspective, that we're problem solving and working together. I mean, that's pretty much required in most jobs. And the reason I love telling this story is because it's really important, because sometimes people are afraid. They're like, well, how do I get into a tech company? What would I do? What would that look like? And so I first want to sort of talk about how it's really straightforward, that if you have an interest and if you have a desire to learn, and maybe there'll be new functionalities or skills you'll have to develop. That being said, there's a huge opportunity because there's so much growth, not only in Calgary, but globally. And when we think about the kinds of roles that we have, and we take a fun team picture every time we have a team meeting. So I put the latest one in here, but so in our team, we have sort of two functions. We have a technical team, and on the business side, our technical team, classic role is software developers. But we also have two other roles. And this one I never really understood until I actually got going into this, was the product management role, right? So the product management role is really like a project manager role, but is really thinking about what are all of the epics and tickets. So like epics is like a big piece of work, and tickets are the small little pieces of that work that build up to create that product. And so that product manager actually just acts as a project manager to think about what are all the elements of the product? What are the screens? What does each of those buttons do? Where do they connect to? And breaking all of that big work into small bite-sized pieces for the developers to then take, build, and then weave together to create your product. And so I love this role because it's really tactical, it's really strategic. And I think it's something that you can have a technical background for, but I've also seen people successfully, I know a school teacher who became a software developer. I know an accountant who became a product manager. So, there's opportunities to kind of transition into these other roles. UX, UI, and design. This is pretty interesting. I'm definitely not good at this, but it's about how do you place buttons in the right place, the right colors, the right shapes. And there's so much interesting value and content around this role and the importance of this role, because I think, product managers and software devs are like, oh, I'll do it. But when you meet someone who's like really talented in it, you can see the difference. And so it's really exciting because you see people transition from different careers into tech companies because they have these skills or just desire to learn. And if anyone has any questions, please jump in. I'll just kind of talk about it on the business side. Business development is really about, a sales role, right? Getting out there and sort of sharing your product and explaining to people sort of the value. And so we focus really less on the features of our product, but more on the value that we create. Operations, sometimes it's called customer success. And this is really about how do you make sure that the customer is successful in using the product. And for Propra, what we think about is, as soon as we put someone into the sales funnel, it's almost like a bow tie, right? Put them into the sales funnel, we get the signed contract signed, but next we want to get them to 100% of their portfolio live on the platform. And so it's that customer success team that works with them, that does a kickoff, that walks them through that journey, answers questions, does any training, uploads data. But also
what do you look for typically in those roles, in the customer success operations roles?
Yeah, it's a lot of the same stuff. It's just more of the desire to learn. You don't have to have a technical background. Naturally, you've got to learn about the product. And then a lot of it is about how do you work with people to problem solve, understand their problem, and either help them solve it in the moment or work within your organization to go and find the answer, right? And so it's about working in cross-functional teams, but understanding that people are dynamic, right? And if people have a different problem, how do you get out there and like hear what they're saying? Because sometimes the customer just wants to complain, and that's okay. And sometimes they've got a really good idea. And sometimes they're somewhere in the middle where they think that they've got this brilliant idea because that's the way they've done it for 40 years. But when you compare it to the rest of the industry, it may not make sense. So you almost take on a coaching role and you say, hey, well, that's a great way, but what if you did it this way? We've seen our customers do it in these 3 ways, and almost working with them and partnering with them, because if the customer is happy, they're going to enjoy the software. And a lot of the times the software is actually helping them, but they're now starting to look for those little nuances. And so that ops role is really about how do we keep them engaged and happy and making the full value or using the full value. Marketing, pretty straightforward. It's how do you tell the story? How do you get out there? A bit of this is in social, but also having a great website and getting the key messaging down. And I think the marketing role is interesting because it helps you with problem definition. Who are you selling your product to? What is the value of it? And I'm sure a lot of you know this, but there's like the 5 whys framework, which is not really a framework. It's just ask the question why 5 times and you'll get to the real answer. And if you don't know and you end up with, I don't know, then go figure it out, because that's something interesting. And so I find marketing team members are really helpful to push on those things. But also in startup, there's tons of things going on. And so you need to apply for grants. You need to apply for different programs, accelerators. Alberta Innovates has some great accelerator programs. And so, the marketing person also helps kind of shape some of that messaging, shape some of that storyline to help you present your business in the most meaningful way. And the last thing is business analysts. And so there's just a lot of business functions to do, right? Be it analysis, be it research, be it competitive, learning about competitor softwares. That takes a lot of time. And so there's a lot of functional roles. But I think the headline for this, which I want to share, is that in a startup, no matter the scale, especially in small ones, you get to try a bunch of different roles. You get to wear different hats. And so sometimes if you want to just explore different roles and you're like, look, think I'm in ops, but I kind of want to see the business side. I want to be able to touch the marketing side. There's always space for you to take initiative. Obviously, you got to get your work done, but to take initiative to kind of see the opportunity to pursue these other areas and grow. And that was my last slide. I'll drop my contact information in the chat, but would love to stay in touch and answer any questions as well.
Just wanted to double check. You guys are strictly on the residential side. You aren't scaling to ERP or commercial ERP yet. Have you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we are focused on the residential space, but we also know that when folks have, imagine you have a tower and you've got a Subway and a Tim's. We need to make sure we have commercial functionality. So actually what we've done is we've built residential functionality, so rental, but condo and commercial tools as well. I think as soon as we finish building out a couple of new features, we've got payments coming up in a couple weeks. We've got this very cool batch processing thing that we're doing. So imagine you're a property manager. Actually, I'll give you an example. Mike, property manager, has 300 units, maybe about 250 owners. Okay, that's a lot of reports, and he produces reports for them on a monthly basis. It takes him 80 hours a month to produce his reports, and he does it every month. We're introducing a new process, which will, that whole idea of automation and autopilot, and we're going to take that 80 hours down to 8. It's going to be amazing. And we just told him it's going to go live on Friday. Those are the coolest things that we're getting to do. So I think as soon as we finish off some of those features, we'll move to things like storage, student housing. And I think if there's folks who want to use it for commercial, sure. But I don't think we're going to go after those, because I think there's some companies out there who are solely focused on that and have mastered things like, gym scheduling, the games room, package delivery, mail delivery, things like that, which doesn't occur as much in the rental. Obviously, package delivery is different. But yeah, great question.
Awesome. Any more questions?
So yeah, what are some of the current challenges you're facing?
Yeah, great question. For Propra, I would say it's 2 things, right? One is we're continuing to grow. We're growing at a really fast pace. And so how do we make sure that we continue that growth, right? Because we want to continue to tell that traction story. And so we're trying to get out there into different markets and meet people who are interested in learning more about the software. So I think one is just how do you keep the pace on traction? I think the second is that there is an economic shift, which I think we've all seen, around more sustainability. You can't just grow at any cost anymore. Valuations are getting tighter. I think VCs are spending or looking to invest less. I think things like Silicon Valley Bank and inflation and interest rates are making things a little harder. And so what that's forcing companies to do is be a little bit more strategic about sustainability, right? So how do you get to break even fast? And so that's the second thing, is we are focused on getting to break even really quickly. And we will most likely get to break even in 18 months from our product launch. So we launch our product in May. Most likely, the goal is October, worst case end of the year, but within 20 months, we'll get to break even, which is lightning fast. And so how do we keep sort of that pace and get there? And the last thing is that we're doing a small raise right now, and it's a slow process. And so how do we see those sort of that investment come in so that we continue to grow? The trick here is, like, startup life is just constantly about prioritizing and reprioritizing. And there's just a ton sort of on the list, and you're always kind of deciding what's important, what's not important, what do you want to do, what do you want to delay?
You've kind of answered part of my question. I was going to ask, have you raised any money yet? But you say you're raising now, right? Or have you raised in the past?
Yeah, we did a small friends and family round, and we're right now doing a small pre-seed round. Our goal is that we can use those funds to get to break even, and we're about 60% of the way through on our round. Happy to share more with you offline. And so the goal of this round is really about a little bit of product development, see more of that automation and that sort of reinvention of property management. And the second is to get past break even, so that every dollar investment after this is really about sort of venture growth and really scaling.
So if it's pre-seed, does that mean you don't have a valuation yet? You're doing a stage?
Yeah, we're using a safe. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you don't have a valuation yet. You don't have a valuation yet. No idea.
Yeah, we have a directional valuation, which we can chat about more offline. But yeah, we have a bit of a directional valuation, and that's because we have a bit of syndication of some folks who kind of said, like, this is what we will price you at. And so for those who may or may not know, a SAFE is a document called a simple agreement for future equity. It's Y Combinator who had designed it. There's the guys at the 500 have got their own document called the KISS. And the idea is it's a simple way of raising funds early on in your journey. And there's different versions of it. A SAFE can have a valuation, it could have no valuation. It could have a discount. So when you do a price round, which is where you say, like, hey, my value of my company is X million or X dollars, let's say X million dollars, X dollars, you would get, your shares would come in and be valued at less than that. So they'd be worth, if the company is worth 10 million, you bought shares when it was 8 million, if there was a 20% discount. And so there's different ways of seeing a SAFE agreement. But yeah, we're working with a SAFE right now.
Okay.
There was a question in the chat. I didn't know it was just to me. So someone is asking if you are hiring.
Great question. So we are not yet hiring, but we're going to be hiring over the summer. But reach out, and my contact, both LinkedIn and my email are there. Reach out and we can chat. And if we don't have a role for you, I'm happy to help you find a role, because we know a bunch of folks, both locally and for remote roles as well.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's one more thing I want to, go ahead, sorry.
No, you go on.
I was going to say is, like, one more thing I've learned really quickly about, like, the Calgary startup scene is that people just want to help. Like, they're just so kind. They want to help you, because I think we as a community are in this together. And so how do we do this in a meaningful way? And that's really important.
And it shows. I mean, the tech innovation space in Calgary is still very nascent, but if you look at the grounds we've covered in such a short time, it's a testament of the support system that is here.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing is for those of you who have companies or are looking at starting companies, there's great programming by Alberta Innovates out there. They do some grant funding, look at things like shred credits. But if you also have a small organization, you want to hire an intern, there's some great programs out there for student intern roles, be it, undergrad or graduates, and funding, like right now, funding is between 50 to 70% for those roles. And so because you're contributing to the community, there's also government funding to support that. So there's a lot of ways to grow your business, not just from external investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, which if people want to talk about, reach out to me and I can share with you some of the things we've learned along the way.
Quick question here.
Yeah.
Hi,
Okay.
Al-Karim. I just want to ask you, have you considered, or do you see any value in extending some of your services to homeowners, not those who are renting their properties? So for instance, property maintenance, right? I still maintain my property, for instance. So do you see any value in doing that?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a big one that we're focused on, which is, let's say you're a landlord and something happens in your unit and you need someone to come in. Maybe you don't have a maintenance team. So we want to create that ecosystem so that you can go out and reach out to someone, and maybe you need a plumber, or you need I don't know, I heard of the story of like a granite countertop that was cracked, and you need an expert to create that perfect seam, right? So we're going to create that marketplace, but we'll make it available to anyone, right? And so as a homeowner, you could have access to that. I heard of a very cool company in the US that's basically maintenance as a service. And so you can just basically pay like $29.99 a month. And if anything goes wrong in your home, you call that person and it's included. Apart from the, like if you break the light fixture, you got to pay for the light fixture, but they'll do all the labor included in that. Very interesting model. I'll try and find the company for you. So I think there's something there, which is because some of that stuff is hard, right? Or you just don't have time for it, right? Like I think like snow shoveling as a service would be really cool too, right? Where it's like really easy to find people who can like do a really good job. I'm joking. I mean, I shovel my walkway, but still, like some days you're just like, I don't want to do this. Yeah, I think you're onto something though. And that's a great idea. Like, I don't know many companies that have done this. I mean, I've heard of like this Angie's List in the US. There's another company I heard of that is like challenging Angie's List, but then you still have to go and find the person and then like select them, which is basically the same thing as Googling, right? So I think what you're saying is, how do you take it one step further and make it even easier?
And is there value in your services for a homeowner that's just renting out their business, like not someone that has a lot of properties, but like a landlord that's renting out the business?
Yeah. That's a great question. We are actually building self-onboarding tools right now so that people who have 1 or 2 or 5, I mean, we had a lady call us the other day, Judy, she has like 11 units. We want to be able to serve that customer. And so that will be, the goal is later this year, but we're kind of committing to 2024, which is a bit safer, because, software development takes a bit longer than you always expect. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that we want to do, because we know that people want to make that easier. I think the data is 1.2 million Canadians have a rental property. A lot of people.
Wow.
And 45% of them self-manage, 55% of them give it to a property manager. And so we know a lot of property management companies who have like, for their, 500 doors, they have 490 owners, because most people just have one and it's like, I don't have time to deal with this, but maybe we could make it easier for them to deal with themselves. So definitely, I definitely think that's something. And that's the other problem with startup life, is like, you always want to do everything. So you got to really pick like, what is your niche? What is the problem you are solving?
It might not be in your best interest to try to do everything too, right?
Yeah.
Because then you're spread too thin.
Exactly. That's always tricky. So yeah, I appreciate that.
I mean, but you can always leverage other, like what Netflix did. They're like, we don't want to be a cloud storage company. We want to produce content, so we can contract that out and focus on what we do best, right?
Exactly. And I think it's also thinking about where you see the value and understanding how to adapt constantly in the market, right? Because you can't, like, you have to listen to the customer. If the customer tells you the same thing, or the VC tells you the same thing, that is a problem. And it's hard because as a founder, you're like, no, there's a problem.
My baby, I know.
Yeah, but if no one is interested, you don't have a business. So listen to the feedback. It's very hard. Right. Yeah, it's very hard, but very valuable.
Okay, thank you so very much, Al-Karim.
Thank you so much. This was an honor. I love chatting about this stuff.
Yeah, this was really engaging, and thanks everyone for participating. So I'll leave the room open for another 5 minutes or so for just networking and chatting. Al-Karim, you're free to leave or stay as you wish, but we
okay,
really
I'm gonna add some folks to LinkedIn really quick. So
okay, yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and please feel free to add me too.
Yeah, most people, I was just gonna say, drop your LinkedIn profile in the chat. Well, I say most people have done that already, because this is a community. We're trying to create this connection so that we can support each other, right?
Absolutely.
So if there's anyone, I was gonna do like a breakout room, maybe for the last 5 minutes, but since we're already past the hour, we could all just stay in this one room and chat for a bit.
Would love to know, are other people like founders, are in tech roles already?
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, I'm secretly a founder.
Secretly.
This is being recorded.
Was this?
Well, no, it is. Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm gonna stop the recording actually for this. Not necessarily because of that. Just now we're just chatting, right?
Yeah, I am a founder. I am an angel investor as well. But on the founder side, I'm currently working on a last mile delivery company. So if you think about Uber takes people around and all of that, but trying to create some kind of Uber-like startup, but for